Hello, everybody, and welcome to the sixth webinar of 9 Months, 9 Universities, the series of online lectures organized within the framework of Working Group 11 of the ARCUS European University Alliance. I'm Barbara Gödecke, and apart from being involved in Working Group 11 of the ARCUS Alliance, I'm also one of the experts on autonomous language learning at the Language Center of the University of Padua. The ARCUS Alliance brings together 9 universities who share academic, scientific, and cultural objectives, a common vision of the role of higher education and research, and mutual fields of interest. And building on this shared foundation, the partner universities are collectively developing an innovative and inclusive approach to education and research. Working Group 11 is the plurilingual and intercultural hub of the Alliance and aims to promote plurilingualism and to foster intercultural competences, one of the soft skills so much needed in today's society amongst the Alliance's universities. The webinar series, 9 Months, 9 Universities, is intended to generate awareness and appreciation for the topic of multilingualism and interculturalism and an understanding of the many areas of our lives that are related to and influenced by language. Let me now introduce you to Professor Alberta Novello, today's speaker from the University of Padua. Alberta holds a PhD in linguistics from Ca' Foscari University in Venice and is an associate professor of educational linguistics at the Department of Linguistics and Literary Studies at the University of Padua. She's also a member of various academic boards that focus specifically on language education in Italy and co-director of CESLE, Centro Studi sulla Linguistica Educativa, a Center for Studies of Educational Linguistics. Alberta is on the editorial boards of a book series and of various language journals. Her main research interests include giftedness, language assessment, and early bilingualism, and she's the author of Inclusive Language Teaching to Highly Able Students, Strategies and Practical Activities. Today's seminar, Unlocking Potential, Effective Strategies for Including Highly Able Students in the Language Classroom, aims to describe the characteristics of highly able students in the foreign language learning process and the aspects educators should take into consideration when adapting to inclusive language programs. Alberta is going to illustrate some methodologies and strategies teachers can use to help gifted students to improve their language competence, and she will share her latest research on language acquisition in highly able students as well as the results of inclusive language lessons tested in several countries with students aged between 8 and 18. Before handing over the screen to Professor Alberta Novello, I would like to remind you to leave your comments and questions in the comment box, and I will pass them over to Alberta at the end of her talk. Well, Alberta, grazie per essere qui con noi, and thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. And now the screen is yours.
Thank you, Barbara, so much, and thank you for this invitation. I'm really happy to talk about gifted students with you today. So in this presentation, we will start from understanding who are highly able students and what are their main features in language learning. And then we will go through some data collected in the past 4 years during a research about gifted students' traits in language learning. That will help us understand which can be the most effective learning activities for the gifted. Additionally, some examples and guidelines will be shared in the second part of this presentation. Well, let's start. And it's really important to emphasize from the beginning that giftedness is a neurodiversity. And since there are no two identical brains, neuroscience tell us that there are no two identical brains, it cannot be neatly defined. Moreover, giftedness includes various traits and characteristics, and students may exhibit high abilities in one or multiple areas, displaying unique qualities. Some main traits. So I'm going to share some main traits regarding gifted students, and we can say that they are rapid and inquisitive learners, capable of processing information at exceptionally high levels and speed. they show a strong curiosity, and they are highly sensitive. As you can see from these slides, they show the ability to generate original creative ideas and solutions. They show excellent reasoning ability, as well as strong sense of justice, for example, morality and empathy. Highly able students are not only very creative, but also eager to delve into their interest. It's showing quite often unconventional expectation. And as you can see from this slide as well, they are really, really original in expression that can be written or artistic, and they show strong emotion and reactions. Highly able students often have high interest and concern for social issues, which is quite interesting for the language classroom, as it allows to introduce many topics with the students. Although these traits may differ from students to another student, studies show that creativity, advanced problem solving, and sensitivities are transversal skills in gifted students. And it's important to understand that creativity, as well as problem solving, inferencing, inductive reasoning, are cognitive processes. And for this reason, they can be applied in different areas. For example, we can find a student that is creative in the use of the language, or that can solve problems linked to math, arts, music, and society, and language rules, of course, as we are going to see. And as you can see, regarding results and performances, they are faster compared to their peers. They master advanced vocabulary at advanced level. They show the ability to find solution and to recognize relationships, understanding meaning and logical association. Once again, I want to point out that they are really sensitive, and they are also sensitive to details and characteristics, because they are really attentive to what is aesthetic. Also, they show the ability to have a flexible thoughts, and they are quite fluent, which we'll understand this even more when we are going to speak about language abilities. And these are just some of the main traits we can find in gifted students, just to introduce the main features in language learning. But it's really important to understand that in the educational settings, they may encounter some challenges and difficulties, because if they are not sufficiently challenged, they can feel a sense of boredom and frustration, which may also lead to underachievement or even dropping out. Without a supportive environment, gifted students may struggle to utilize or develop their ability, potentially leading to feeling of sadness or even anger. So highly able students need to be included in the language classroom, respecting and knowing their abilities. Sometimes they may not fully comprehend their own talents and strengths, and they may perceive themselves as different, especially when they are really young. And so they compare themselves to their peers, and they perceive themselves as different, which can contribute to a sense of alienation. So this is why it's even more important to understand how gifted students' brain works and how to include their abilities and strengths in the language classroom. And with respect to the main features of highly able students' language acquisition, studies have shown that they can have these following traits. So I'm going just to share a few of them, just to because I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information. But it's really important to understand how their brain's work in language acquisition. So for example, regarding linguistic learning abilities, they show the ability to learn multiple languages quickly. That's why it's really, really interesting observing very young learners and very young gifted learners learning multiple languages. They show an excellent vocabulary retention, and this is very good information for language teacher, as they should challenge these students even more and expose them to abundant input, since they can memorize vocabulary in a very good way. They show a rapid language acquisition from various sources. This is another important information because it includes varieties in the language classroom. They have the ability to reproduce sounds. This is another tip that could be used in the language classroom in order to expose this type of students to abundant oral input. They can understand language as a holistic system, and they possess advanced communication skills, especially as we're going to see oral skills. Additionally, one of the most interesting trait is that they can deduce language rules without efforts by being exposed to authentic input. And so just reading or listening to some examples, they can understand how the language works. They can recognize grammar patterns and the function of vocabulary in sentences. So as you can see, as we have introduced early, the problem solving linked to language acquisition is really high and advanced, and they can infer which type of roots the language has by being exposed to abundant input. They have the ability to extrapolate meanings, as we have just said, make inferences and transfer knowledge creatively. They can use compensatory strategies. This is really useful, sometimes funny to observe in the language classroom, the way they can convey the message using other words or other sentences. So they have a very autonomous use of compensatory strategies. They can reapplicate creatively what they have just learned using flexible thinking and the excellent reasoning and argumentation skills. Furthermore, gifted students show strong curiosity about language and its functioning. They usually ask many questions about how the language works, and they show interest and ability to acquire, recall, and manipulate advanced vocabulary and grammatical concepts. Moreover, gifted students show the awareness of linguistic use in a very advanced way, as well as the willingness to engage and risk. This is quite interesting, as gifted students sometimes, not always of course, but sometimes they tend to be perfect, to show perfectionism, but the willingness to communicate goes beyond the fears of failure. So they try to use the language, they risk a little bit more, and this is really useful for the language teacher in order to plan their activities. Gifted students are autonomous in acquire content and skills because they can anticipate, by being exposed, of course, to language input, what are the use of the language, what are the language rules they are going to learn and apply. And they show a very strong desire to communicate that drives them to process language use and language mechanism. Another important area of interest and advanced traits that have been observed with gifted students is the interest in other cultures. They are really eager to understand and observe other cultures, and they show empathy towards them, as well as a global sense of community and respect for cultural differences. We all know that we cannot teach a language without teaching our students how to observe culture related to that language. So it's really important to involve gifted students, but not only them, indeed, in intercultural competencies. So these are just some traits, as I've mentioned before, in order to understand how the brain works in learning the language and what kind of suggestion we can bring for the language classroom. It's fundamental to understand them and to respect these characteristics to plan effective language lesson and to avoid feelings and behaviors that could be negative for the students himself or herself and for the entire class. I'm going to read you a couple of statements which I think are quite useful to understand this sense of negative behavior that feelings that students can develop in the language classroom. So the first one is this: so learning English at school is truly boring. You read the book and memorize the terms. I get excited and learn better by acting out myself in my English-speaking avatar. So this is quite interesting because boredom is often a feeling that gifted students feel in language classroom if they are not challenged enough because of all the high processes cognitive they can use, as we have just seen. And knowing their peculiarities help us understand their learning. I'm going to read another statement. English is my favorite language because I like the sound, I like the, also because it's one of the most spoken languages and you can speak to a lot of people. Moreover, because I speak this language since I was very young, and it brings me back to very good memories. Besides, I think that I love about this language is the lexicon because the words have specific meaning. So it's really interesting to understand how the students perceive the language, how they can analyze the language, and the level of interest they put into learning the language. And this statement is particularly insightful because it highlights the role of emotion in language learning, which is crucial for gifted students, as emotions can modify our brain networks. So it's really important to include emotion in language learning, of course, not only for gifted students, but for each student. But maybe this is the topic for another webinar. And on the basis of the above mentioned traits and features of gifted students in language learning and the main theories, of course, research has been conducted to further investigate how highly able students learn languages. In the first one, data was collected from more than 200 language teachers who experienced working with gifted students and 36 gifted students and their parents in an Italian context. While the second, and which is the latest research, has been conducted interviewing 97 gifted students. And I'll briefly present a small part of this data in order to give you some more information about their learning and then to better understand which type of activities we can use in the language classroom. And for example, the interest in learning cultural aspects that has, how you can see, it's really high, as it was indeed in the Italian study. And this is a useful reminder to not overlook culture in the language classroom. As you will see, most of these suggestions indeed are useful for entire classroom. That's why understanding how gifted students learn a language is really inclusive. And As you can see from these charts, students' favorite language abilities are speaking and listening, which confirms their willingness to be involved in authentic interaction as emerged indeed in both studies. So the Italian students and also the 97 students who were they were all students from English-speaking countries. They show a strong interest in speaking and listening. And about the favorite way of learning a language, this is one of my favorite data. They declare that they prefer listen to the language and then try to use it, which confirms their ability to deduce how a language works. And I have to say that this data was even higher in the Italian study, but this was quite predictable, as in Italy, students are more exposed to English as a foreign language, so they are more exposed to foreign languages compared to native speakers of English studying other languages, of course. But anyway, this data is really interesting because it's helps us understand once again that gifted students are willing to be involved in inductive reasoning as they advance abilities to deduce how the language works. And I'll show you some more example. This one regards performing grammar exercises, and as you can see, they don't like performing grammar exercise that much because in most cases, they are quite repetitive, static, and mechanic, so they are not bringing that part of novelty and language reasoning that students need. On the contrary, they love speaking to people in the foreign language. As you can see, they really love speaking, so they want to use the language for authentic purposes. And on the basis of these very few data that I'm sharing with you, then I will bring some bibliography if you are interested in knowing something more. We can share some guidelines for the language classroom. First of all, it's really important to involve students in a variety of authentic speaking and listening tasks. Then it's fundamental to provide contextualized and abundant language input to facilitate the deduction of words and rules. Of course, it's really important to stimulate advanced problem solving for both linguistic deduction and understanding and real life situation. As they are really strong in using problem solving, we can use this cognitive process linked to many areas in the language classroom. So we can use it to solve linguistic problems, but also to solve real life society problems, for example, using the language. Another suggestion is to implement tasks that allow for high levels of creative language use and frequently use authentic material, task, and situation. As we have just seen, they want to use the language for real purposes, and they can deduce the language rules by being exposed to abundant input. And the more authentic, the more engaging, of course, this input can be. Another suggestion is to incorporate numerous intercultural objectives within the curriculum, as they are really interested in cultural and intercultural competence, and to develop the use of advanced language cognitive processes and strategies. This is a crucial point because language teachers need to understand which are the language strategies and cognitive processes that are included in language abilities. In this way, they can develop these strategies and these cognitive processes to stimulate and develop in a more advanced way these language abilities. So I'm talking about, of course, speaking, listening, writing, reading, and mediating. Teachers should avoid repetitive and static tasks, as we have just seen. Give the students don't like to be involved in this type of exercises, and of course use a fair assessment method, which is useful for every student, of course, but in this particular case it's really important to take into account the effort gifted students put into reaching advanced language abilities using their cognitive processes. Research led to the suggestion of learning activities suitable for highly able students and for their features in language learning. I'll share now just only a few of them, because otherwise I'm sharing too much information, and I would like to focus on some of them in order that language teacher can start from recognizing some of these features, recognizing some of these learning activities, and then implement them more and more in the language classroom. So as you can see from this chart on the left, you can find highly able students features in language learning, and on the right, learning activities that are more suitable for their processes. For example, for advanced problem solving, we can use real life situation to solve by creating, planning, organizing, analyzing, evaluating. So we stimulate the use of problem solving into language topics, into language acquisition. Regarding the strong deduction, we can expose to abundant, authentic language to deduce word meaning and rules, followed by creative comprehension activities. For example, then of course there are more activities regarding the deep and fast inductive reasoning, excellent memorization, advanced oral skills, translation abilities, because they love to translate for others, so for authentic purposes. This is another useful information for the language teacher, as often translation exercises are a little bit boring for our students, but when they translate for real life situation, for real purposes, for real people, they love, be useful, and use translation activities. And regarding the advanced processes and strategies, including in the speaking activities, we can help them in selecting ideas and organizing these ideas. It's really important to understand, as I said before, it's really important to understand how they use the cognitive processing linked to language activities like speaking, listening, reading, and writing, and then to stimulate and develop these processes. For example, gifted students are not good at planning because they have so many ideas in their brains in the same moment when they have to start to write an exercise, or when they have to start speaking with someone else. So they have these many thoughts going around, and they encounter some difficulties in planning. So this is why in the language classroom we should enhance some activities that help our students plan and organize their ideas. For example, in reading, we can use stimulation of advanced inferencing, linguistic, of course, cultural, and pragmatic. As we have just seen, they are really, really good in inferencing. So we can use this type of ability to make our students read at a more advanced level. We can help them in the selection and categorization or classification of information, because another information that we understood from the collected data is that that they are really strong in in classification, and hierarchization of information. And so we can use this ability in our language classroom, as well as creative construction on mind mapping. Regarding intercultural competence, of course, we can involve them in this in advanced discussions about the topic and using authentic materials. The second part, so these were just few examples of activity we can use in the language classroom in order to respect and stimulate our students' cognitive processes and our students' features in language learning. And in language learning, and all this information led to a second part in this research, which involved in the Italian studies. It involved the planning and creation of several language lessons, while in the international study, it involved the planning and testing of 16 lessons in different contexts, as you can see. So lessons were conducted in different countries and in different settings, either individually or in classroom setting, with some classes being composed of heterogeneous students and some other classes with only gifted students. So this approach was taken with intention of testing different modalities as, in my opinion, an inclusive environment involves different modalities. It does not require students to complete the same assignment with the same techniques. Instead, it is designed based on a multi-level structure. This means that lessons are organized to allow students to reach individual goals through different methods and materials, either in group or individually, inside or outside the classroom. So in this way, we do respect each student's characteristics, and we start planning our course by analyzing students' needs and then planning accordingly. So for this reason, we tested many lessons in different contexts. So as you can see, from Italy to Finland, Albania, and USA, and for different language classrooms. So you can see in this chart, we tested lessons for Italian as a first language, Italian as a foreign language, English as a foreign language, Spanish and Japanese as foreign languages. And I'm going to show you one example of this lesson in order to understand how we involve different type of traits and characteristics of gifted student in our language planning. And this lesson, the first one, I'm going to, okay. In this one, which was for Italian as a first language, we tested the language planning in a primary school with students aged 9 to 11, especially in 2 third grade classes in which the teacher had identified 2 gifted students, and in 1 5th grade class in which there is a student with a giftedness assessment. And the main objective of the lesson was to be able to understand written text and interact in a discussion. Students had an authentic task, which should be almost always used in the language classroom. And in this case, it was to prepare an artwork. And now I'm going to show you the lesson. So, and then maybe we can go back to this planning. And the language activities involved were reading, speaking, and writing. So in the first phase, students, so this is the language planning. Students are shown some photos of Yoko Ono art installation through a PowerPoint presentation, and are asked if they have ever seen it and what they think it represents. Next, the teachers share with them the main features of the artwork and ask what they think it's the purpose of this art installation. And after a second brainstorming, the teacher informs that they will do an artwork and an activity that will help them understand and reflect about peace. And in the second phase, the teacher suggests drawing inspiration for note, writing from reading a short story, and invites students to read this passage and in this passage that however lacks of the ending. So the students have to read the text where the final part has been cancelled. So they have to write what they think the story will go on. So students in pair and in groups have to write the end of the story. In the third phase, students are given the full text with a request to read it and to add additional comprehension activities, and such as the following. So they had to make hypotheses about the title, which was conducted in the third grade. They had to answer to global comprehension question. They had to rearrange the passages divided into paragraphs and explain inferences. So according to the language levels and the age of the students, these type of exercises have been proposed. Then the class is divided into small groups, with some groups searching for positive words and concepts related to friendship and peace, and some other groups searching for negative words regarding the same aspects. And the teacher then collects the words in the blackboard, dividing them into two categories in order the student can start categorizing the different words. And then they all together add more words. In the fifth phase, the students have to choose a keyword from the ones they have just read together and found and searched together. And this keyword has to express a thought related to the topic, and then the teacher stimulate a plenary discussion. Some painting, as you can see from the slide, some painting representing peace are shown to the students to help them and encourage them in further discussion. In the next phase, students are asked to write cards related to their wishes for pieces. So they have shown at the beginning of the lesson Yoko Ono art installation, and now they are asked to do something similar, and they prepare cards while they are listening to us. Teachers in this case chose to make the students listening to some songs in order to be even more inspired in writing these cards, and then students and teacher read together some of the some poems regarding the topics. In the final phase, students are asked to hypothesize how they think all the note cards collected by Yoko Ono might have used, and they make some hypotheses, and after these hypotheses they are shown this art installation in Iceland in which all the cards have been buried, and there is also a video showing that this installation is illuminated twice here, so this video can be also shown for the students. And at this point, students are asked how they can spread the messages. So they make hypotheses and they do a brainstorming about how they can use the cards and how they can spread the peace messages. And the top rated idea are chosen by the teachers. And in this particular case, when this lesson was tested in Italy, students chose to hang the messages in the school trees and to prepare some cardboard for new students coming, unfortunately, from a world area. And every lesson indeed included in this testing research has been observed using grids as the one I'm showing you, and of course using some criteria. And it has been observed that these activities with specific tasks, for example, authentic goals and authentic materials, were successful not only for the gifted, but for the entire class, leading to an inclusive approach. Where, as we said before, sometimes students can work autonomously or with different goals and with different materials. And in this lesson in particular, both teachers were enthusiastic of the results. They considered the activities particularly useful, and students were greatly engaged, and particularly highly able students were involved more than in other activities. So this type of planning, this type of approach allows students to be involved, to be involved more compared to other activity by using authentic material, open-ended tasks, and authentic interaction, and of course an authentic goal for the lesson. And teachers appreciated the openness of the task, which allowed every student to participate according to their level and to, of course, to their cognitive level, language level, and social level. And all the testing lesson have confirmed and demonstrate the following characteristic in highly able students. So propensity for active participation in verbal exchange, possession of a vivid imagination, the development of abstract thinking skills, proficient pronunciation abilities. They show agility in cognitive processing, including inductive reasoning. They express high levels of creativity, like including the use of the language. They show positive leadership and sensitivity to social issues, as well as a deep sense of justice, and they were able to work autonomously while deeply engaged in students with other students in teachers' activity. So failure by the educational system to recognize and to accommodate the unique characteristic can be harmful for the student. It can jeopardize both their well-being and their academic trajectory. So it's really, really important to know, first of all, and then respect these student traits in order to involve them successfully in their school career. And especially for language learning, as you could see, there are many traits that can be useful to plan in an inclusive and effective way our language classroom. So knowing not only these students, but all students with neurodiversity traits in learning language can be really, really useful for them, first of all, and for the entire classroom. And so thank you so much for this invitation and for the possibility to talk about gifted students. And even though this was a quick and brief presentation and we share just some traits, I think it's a good start. A good start for the teachers to know the students and to plan the language lesson accordingly.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much for this very interesting talk. And while I'm waiting, if there are upcoming questions, I'm I am very lucky that I can ask my questions.
Okay.
First of all, I was really, really impressed by how aware the students, like the two examples at the nearly beginning of the presentation, how the two students, how the 7-year-old and the 12-year-old expressed their issues with language learning. And yeah, as you said, I mean, the guidelines are definitely useful for the language classrooms in general, because as always, if a classroom is inclusive, everybody benefits from it, because
Sure.
there are no two brains the same. So, but really, really impressive, the two examples of the students.
Yeah, yes, indeed, it was quite impressive to collect this type of statement from the students, because there's no difference from 6 years old to 18
Mhm,
years old. They are really aware of
mhm,
the learning processes and how they perceive their learning into the classroom. So it
mhm,
was really surprising. I've included some more example and statement in the books, and even from students with autism or dyslexia,
mm.
they are so much aware of their potential and of what they need to succeed in the language classroom. So this was really impressive. I agree with you.
Yeah, and it leads to my next question. I mean, that wasn't a question, but it was just a statement. But before what I made, but what I was wondering is, are highly able students? Is it possible to find? And you already answered to it. More than one neurodiversity in highly able students, or is it very frequent to find more than other neurodiversities in highly able students?
So neuropsychologists and neuroscientists are still studying this topic. So I cannot answer if it is frequent or not, but definitely more than one neurodiversity can coexist in
Mhm,
students with high abilities.
mhm,
So we can find highly able students with ADHD, with dyslexia, with autism, or all these things together.
mhm,
So we talk about neurocomplexities. And studies are shown that we are understanding even more this type of neurocomplexity. And we cannot say that it's quite often to find them, but we are trying to understand if it's frequent or not. And but it's really important that, for example, asking for diagnosis or evaluation, refer to experts in this psychology area, because sometimes more than one neurodiversity can delay
mhm,
diagnosis or lead to misdiagnosis, because students can compensate some neurodiversity with another one, so they can use their strength. For example, they can students with dyslexia, which is a very important topic for the language classroom, of course, can be diagnosed in high school or at university, because they have compensated their
mhm,
difficulties with their strategies, but
mhm,
that maybe can lead to not show their fully potential, because they are struggling. They are succeeding, but they are struggling. So they could do even more
mhm,
if some expert can find all the neurodiversity. So definitely, yes, we can find a coexistence of these characteristic in gifted students.
mhm. Which then brings also to the risk of, I mean, if it's not diagnosed or certified, it can lead to the risk really of misinterpreting the behavior of a student in the classroom, thinking, like misinterpreting uh, the energy, the positive energy, like he or she wants to disturb
Yeah, so
the others, can he's always there wanting to answer to the questions, can't wait. And I
yes,
mean,
these are all signals that gifted students are giving to ask for
mhm,
something more, to ask for
mhm,
something more challenging. And
mhm,
sometimes these signals are not understood. And so that leads to a very difficult path. Sometimes students, for example, give the student, they refuse to do homework or to complete tests in the classroom because these are too easy for them, and they don't find another way to say it's too easy for me, I want something more, so they just refuse to complete the test, for example. And this is interpreted by some teachers like he's not able to do the test. Maybe he has some difficulties, and instead it's really the opposite case.
So basically, the risk, apart from boredom and frustration, the risk is really to lose the student on the track or so.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. This can lead to abandon of school. So it's not fair for them, and it's not fair for the society as well, because
Yeah.
we are losing this potential.
Yeah, we're losing big potential. And also, I mean, one of the questions, or not questions, but the things that popped up in my mind was like, wow, if highly able students have these abilities, maybe as a language teacher, if I had one of those students in my class, I would risk to overuse them also in like, because there could be a very good interaction, and they could be helpful for the class. I mean, realizing that authentic materials are less boring than textbook activities, and grammar exercises, as we all know, I mean, are repetitive, and they are good, obviously, and they're very, very useful. I'm not saying anything against grammar exercises, but it's good to have also a student who is interested in having something more. I mean, once you recognize it as something more, as a positive effect, and not,
Yeah, because we change the way we think how an effective lesson plan can be. And so it allows us to have wider maybe variety of things we can use in a language classroom. So we have more opportunities, more type of activities, more type of exercises, more different methodologies we can use in the language classroom. And this can benefit each student we have in our group, indeed.
yeah, it makes the classroom more authentic. I
Yes.
mean, all together. And just one last question I wanted to ask: is there what kind of abilities did the teachers observe more frequently? If there was something like, how to say, graduatoria, I don't know the hit list of the most
Yeah.
frequent abilities in highly gifted students in language learning.
Yeah, when I asked this question to more than 200 language teachers who experience working with different students, most the 70% of them answers that they are really good in memorizing lexicon without difficulty. And we, of course, we know that they have very good memory and excellent memory, and it's quite interesting understanding that this is the first thing that teachers notice, because maybe it makes us understand we are working too much with memorization of list of words. And but it's also a useful information because they can memorize a lot of words, so maybe we can challenge them a little bit more by being exposed to abundant input, since they can retain lexicon in such a good way. And then they declare that gifted students are very good at deducing language rules without effort. So these were the two major traits that they declared, and they are, of course, interesting, especially the inductive reasoning approach, because we can change our way to teach to all our students, because inductive reasoning is as I told before, is a cognitive process, and every cognitive processes are very useful to enhance, develop in the language classroom. And other two traits that they declare were good pronunciation. So they can, as they can observe they are really attentive to the language. They want to reproduce the language in a good way. So they are really good with pronunciation and with creativity, of course. They can use the language in a creative way. They are the type of students that learn a new word, and then use this new word immediately in a creative sentence. So they are really, really creative. And and also this indicate that speaking is one of the strongest ability. And indeed, teachers notice that they are really, really good at speaking.
Okay. Well, thinking about the presentation, that also brings you, if you learn vocabulary very, very quickly, and so that means you build up to a good vocabulary, and you understand the roots, then you really want to use what you've just learned. You don't learn these things just for the sake of learning them. I mean, usually.
Yeah, because they don't have a static mind, for sure. So they want to learn and then use, and especially use for authentic purposes and also for social purposes, because it has been observed that gifted students have this desire to improve society. And I think this is such an important information we can use in the language classroom, because we can use the language to really improve society and to solve social issues in our classroom. From young students to older students, we can use social topics and talk about the social issue in the language target, in the target language.
Agreed. 100% agreed. Okay.
Okay.
There is a question, an upcoming question. Is there a difference between gifted and highly able students, or are these interchangeable terms?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't explain at the beginning because I'm using these two terms interchangeably. So no, there are no difference in. I prefer the word, the expression highly able students, because it's something. It gives the idea of something that has to be stimulated and developed. But indeed, we are talking about the same group. So gifted student or highly able student is the same thing.
Okay. So grazie Anna for this question.
Grazie.
And at the moment, I don't see other questions. For sure, I mean, the talk is recorded and will be watchable, and there might be coming questions later, and we will check up on that.
Okay.
And at the moment, I would really, once again, thank you so much for having shared your knowledge and expertise, and for having shared this very, very interesting topic with us. Thank you. And thank you to all the people who have attended or who have watched in streaming. And yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much again for this invitation. Thank you so
you,
much.
Alberta.
Grazie.
Bye.
Bye. Ciao. Grazie.
Bye.